Okay, all right. Okay, board members, we'll get this meeting started. Ms. Angel, would you lead us in the pledge? Okay, board members, before we get started, I just wanted to inform everyone that the information listed is information only, and we are going to make a decision about how we want to proceed with this process. So before I start with the first agenda item, I just wanted to make that clear to everyone. So we'll start with agenda item 2.1, facilities discussion and or action concerning evaluation criteria, request for qualifications for small capital projects. Okay, so we'll start with any comments from the board? Okay. Which? You can't hear me?
Test mic, 1, 2, test mic.
Test mic, 1, 2.
Testing.
Can you?
Yeah,
Testing.
Testing.
Testing. A waitress to the bandstand, please. One waitress.
Just go ahead and get a bucket,
Mr. Guidry, do you have any comments while we're waiting?
Just wanted to mention with regards to the first agenda item, just the format of it. So of course, the recommended action, as you alluded to, is to request from the board a recommendation with regards to the criteria to be included in future RFQs. And in the public content section, we have included RFQs, sample RFQs from 3 other school districts, either comparable in size to us. I think most of them are a little larger, but nonetheless offer some comparability. We've attached the RFQs and have made references to the sections in those RFQs that relate to the subject matter of this particular agenda item, which is the evaluation criteria for our RFQs. So just wanted to sort of explain the format, what was included in the agenda item. And the whole idea is by including these sample RFQs and the information that Mr. Charles Hardy with Hammers and Seals will be providing us with as a result of some of the research that he's done. It'll provide the board with information they need to identify those criteria that they would like to see included in RFQs for small capital projects going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Guidry.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. LeBoux?
I know that they do an oral interview. I'm assuming we do we do anything similar like that for our larger projects?
Yes.
The selection committee, okay.
It's optional. We put it in the RFQ when we determine that it would benefit the process.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't always used it for the larger projects. More times than not, we have. It just sort of depends on how close the scoring comes in.
Okay.
After it's evaluated. If it's within a few points, then we do in fact ask typically the top 3 firms to come in.
And then when you do that oral interview, do you inquire as to the, I guess the contractor, somebody they would be selecting? If you did the, let's say the architecture interview, are you asking them, what team are you envisioning going forward with this project, or do you just hire, are you just interviewing them for their purposes and then allowing them the selection to go forward on, how does that work, I guess?
We typically ask them to present their methodology in terms of how they approach the project, how they would approach the projects that we're looking at awarding. The possibility, who the team members would be.
Okay.
More times than not, they bring them with them, so we get to meet them and take a look at their methodology, maybe even take a look at some of the projects they've done that are similar in nature. So it's just to get a better feel for the firm, but more specifically, information that's more specific to the project that we're looking at. And so that's sort of the gist of it.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Aguilar?
Yes, thank you. The documents that you provided, thank you for sharing those. I had gone online trying to find similar documents, but didn't have much luck to identify Ascension in particular. The evaluation criteria used by Ascension Parish is somewhat similar to the evaluation criteria used by East Baton Rouge Parish. And we additionally had attached some documents from a local architect here in Lafayette. I did not see as much useful information provided in the Bossier Parish School Board document. However, there is some similar criteria that they mention that they would use in evaluating awarding projects.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend is that we take those three documents, the Ascension Parish, the East Baton Rouge Parish, and the local architect contributions, and we find common elements, and that would lead us to the criteria most important in our selection process. And then from there would be a matter of awarding how many points or value for each of those criteria. So is that something, Mr. Gidry, Mr. Bordelon, you would be willing to do, is to take those three documents with Mr. Charles Hardy's assistance and then merge them together to find the common elements and then recommend I guess a hybrid for Lafayette Parish to use?
Yes, and I'll ask Charles to comment on, Charles had reviewed several RFPs, not only the ones that you've mentioned, but he also looked at it from a national level, some of those that he was able to. And so Charles, I know you delineated several criteria. Would you view those as being, as addressing Dr. Aguilar's request?
Basically, I went through, well, the EBR one I had drafted, Ascension was most likely based upon EBRs as well. I also went and searched Google and came up and found a large number of architect RFQs just to get an idea of what criteria was being used, and generally they were about the same throughout. And there were about 11 major categories that I was able to find, and that's in the memo. I have them delineated, and I believe they were actually parsed out and given to the EGL. The one thing that's not in there that was in a lot of other ones is price, which we cannot consider. And it doesn't really matter. We use I think that this board uses the state formula strictly. But generally it's either a flat fee or a state formula, or in Baton Rouge case, the state formula about 20 years old. That doesn't go over too well with firms.
Which is where we were before we adopted the current state standard.
I think y'all were behind on the curve when y'all changed it. So basically we have these 11 categories, and the question is, particularly for these minor or smaller projects, is what's important to this board as far as criteria. For example, I know I've at least heard that there's a desire to get smaller firms involved. The problem with that is if you have a criteria that's heavily weighted towards experience, most likely the smaller firms won't have that experience. Now, what we have, I did suggest in my memo, and I believe the architect's suggestion, he had a few tiers, I had one tier of the bid threshold, is maybe select a smaller pool of those architects for purposes of the smaller projects, that those smaller projects will go just to that little group in an effort to give them some experience. With the larger projects being vetted a little bit heavy, those firms being vetted a little heavier, selecting a group of firms, 5 or so firms, maybe some sub-consultants, typically who would be sub-consultants such as mechanical engineers, civil engineers, to select a little pool from there so you can avoid the middleman on projects like an HVAC project. So you don't have the architect who then just goes and hires a mechanical work. So with that in mind, it's important that we kind of know what are these criteria y'all going to look for. We can tailor the RFQ to identify or remove those categories of experience, qualifications, or some of those to create that separate pool, and we can have like 2 different evaluations, or we can, I believe the architect had a section where they scored 50 points, and as long as they scored 50 points, you pick a certain number to put into that smaller pool. Another benefit of doing this, if you select a smaller pool, it would, I think, would create an opportunity for maybe some minority firms, some women-owned business firms that don't have the experience and are relatively new, and maybe get their foot in the door as well. So that's another benefit of having that smaller pool. You may be able to get that group involved a little bit more. I believe also location is important, particularly for these projects. I was asked to see, there's a lot of our firms that have an office in Lafayette, but is it the board's desire that they have a home office in the parish itself? Or do you want a radius where you can get into some of the outlying parishes that are close? But if they have a home office, there would be, they would have some skin in the game, basically, where they would be paying taxes and they would have an investment in the community. So that may be a consideration that may want to be included in the RFQ as well. Other than that, I mean, you got these 11 criteria. I think they're all important. It's just a matter of what's important to y'all and how y'all want to weight stuff, and if y'all want to take some stuff out.
Mr. Latchley?
Mr. Hardy, one thing I'd like to see, whether it's just as a question or gradable, is what experience do you have in building what we're building?
Okay, and that was something, thank you. No, I probably don't.
Because I mean, I get it, all these architects are very smart individuals. I mean, they could probably build anything, they can draw anything. But myself, in my district moving forward, I will use the assignment process if necessary to match an individual to a specific project, just for the fact of they have experience and they have built these things before. It's not saying that anyone can't design or build anything, but if you've built 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, you've already gone through all the hits and misses and the mistakes and the so forth and so on, and have real not. So I'd like to see something of that nature in there where we can ask, all right, we're building a girls'
Press
gym
box?
at Lafayette High. Was that? A press box? I wasn't gonna bring that one up.
All right, I've
Miss
heard about the
Libu-
press box.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? It's, you know, how many of these have you built? Well, if you've built some already, a lot of things we're gonna build, or even moving forward, I look at, we've got one shot. We've got one shot to build some of these things, and if it doesn't come out right, or if it's not what it's supposed to be, and the communication wasn't there, there is no redo. So I want experienced people that have built these types of projects, building these types of projects, and that's, I just assigned a project in my district with the help of the board to build something that these people have built before, and I'm not worried about it now. It's gonna be okay.
And, you know, I don't know, I have no problem with that. In fact, I don't like just random selection. I think there has to be subjective criteria to use. You want somebody experienced. Now, with respect, and that may be more on the, I think, the second or third agenda item. I think it's probably the second. But as far as the selection of a pool of architects for the smaller projects, I mean, these projects range, okay, maybe Kyle can help me out on this, but these projects have a pretty broad scope of what they are. So what you're gonna look for most likely in getting this pool together is for the bigger projects, you're gonna look for those bigger firms that have probably been experienced with this board, or with other boards, so you know that they've done educational type of facilities, whether they be athletic, whether they be cafeterias, school buildings, gyms, whatever. And then when you get to the selection,
Right.
I think, I don't like the lottery system, but I don't also like just go down the line either. I think there has to be a selection based upon the ability of a particular firm to do that type of work.
Correct.
Which is where this is generally done at an administrative level, and they're the ones that deal with these architects on a regular basis, so you trust that they make the recommendation to you based upon their experience, and that's what I would recommend. There has to be some subjectivity, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be 2.3, but yeah, a lot of the bigger projects, I'm 100% in support of it coming to the board floor to be voted on, and, I mean, the board member representing the district's gonna have some skin in the game. It is our constituents that we're doing this for, and it is our constituents we answer to, and, I plan on the rest of my time sitting up here being just a tad bit more involved than I was before. But yeah, I think my question was for 2.3, but you answered it, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. But like I said, for this particular item, right, I think you will get that group, a big enough group where you will have that experience for those types of projects, for a range of projects.
And I think you are correct with the small projects, bringing in these new firms and letting them cut their teeth. That, I would support that 100%, without a doubt.
Mr. Rangel?
First of all, I go along with the comments made by my colleague. We're talking about a selection process, and you mentioned the administration or whatever makes the recommendation. Are you talking about you guys, or
Not me, I'm not the administration.
who are the people that make the recommendation?
Typically, it's the construction department makes a recommendation. Are we talking about, let me clarify what we're talking about. Are we talking about selection of the pool of architects, which is the agenda item, or are we talking about the selection of architects once they've been chosen for individual projects?
Both. Talking about both. My question is this: the construction department or whatever department that you said, whether it's selecting the pool or the whatever else you were talking about, are any of those people that make that selection architects?
No, but they
Wait, I'm sorry.
on the RFQ, there would be an architect on the evaluation committee.
No, but people that work for us, work for the school board on a full-time basis, that are involved in selecting the architects, are any of them architects?
Not that I'm aware, I don't know if anybody's an architect, no.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. LeBou?
I like that. Okay, so my understanding is we do the RFQ, right? And that's good for a 1-year basis. whatever experience and whatever information they put down on the RFQ is what we're gonna use to select projects throughout that entire year. So that is what they will be using to select for that entire year, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
although I would suggest a little bit longer than 1 year, but that's.
I would be okay with 2, but again, that cuts off the ability, maybe below a certain dollar amount, we allow new firms in without having to redo, the whole RFQ process, just because, we do want to allow, if we're talking about allowing smaller firms, maybe that's done on an annual cycle versus the larger RFQ for the larger projects, I guess we have new definitions or new proposed definitions for projects in different levels, which we've typically used small project and large project, and now we're going to have to transfer into, and I like it, don't get me wrong, different levels of projects, whether it be, small projects or small capital projects, then projects of minor complexity, then projects of major complexity. I feel like we're going to have to be very careful in the verbiage of how we're referring to projects from here on out, because I can see those names getting shortened and very confused between people, but I like that we have those different levels and categories. I just hope that we can, if that's what we decide to go with, we can communicate them properly so everybody understands a small project is this, and now we have smaller projects, but they're of minor complexity, major complexity, and then large projects. I mean, it's a lot of levels, but I hope that, but I think there's value in that, so I hope that we can move forward, but everybody can maybe come to an agreement on how we're going to define and categorize and select them, because that is a lot of different, groups of projects. I like that Ascension and East Baton Rouge do have a subjective process in which they rely on their administration to, lead the way on selection, because I think that there's value in the experience that they've had. I like the rubric that's been proposed from the architect, that was very generous to draft up a proposed rubric, because it does have heavily weighted categories that allow for Kyle and Ian and Billy to put in their 2 cents about the past performance, experience in LPSS work, which I think historically we haven't allowed LPSS projects to be part of our consideration, as well as the quality of the consultants. I like that we have those subjective categories within objective categories. How big is the size of your firm? Where are you located? Yes, I would like them to have a home office here if possible. So I really like the rubric that's been put together and proposed. I think we could build on it, like you said, with the East Baton Rouge and Ascension information, but I really like this rubric because it does allow for the people that we've hired and put in charge to give their opinion of the past performance or the quality of the performance of who's done work, if they have done work before. If they haven't done work before, we could take those categories out, and that could be that small capital project rubric that we use. That's all objective because we have no prior experience to talk about with them. But again, that's gonna be multiple applications, different RFQs. I think we're just gonna all have to be very clear if we do it that way, that as we move up in complexity of project, maybe the rubric needs to move up, or maybe the RFQ process needs to move up. I don't know if that's something that we just ask them to fill out the RFQ that complies to whatever their level.
Generally, these projects aren't going to be
Okay.
very big in scope. Your individualized projects, like a new school would be a whole.
It's an RFP itself,
If
right?
it's an addition
Yeah.
or like a wing addition or something, that's going to be done through an RFP. These are going to be almost
All
single
small.
discipline
Yeah.
type jobs, roofing jobs, stuff that does not require, you don't want to go out on an RFQ individually for these types of projects.
Yeah.
Generally, with the exception of East Baton Rouge Parish, these projects are assigned just randomly at the whim of whomever's in charge of assignment. I don't know, outside of East Baton Rouge, I don't know of anyone that has a true, they call it indefinite delivery, but however, this is going to end up being term minor complexity or lesser complexity. Most are done just individually by somebody on staff. They select and they pick. The only one I know of, and we deal with a lot of boards that does it through an RFQ process, is East Baton Rouge. And they actually, they're supposed to do it every 3 years. This was like a 10-year deal. They were waiting 10 years for this last one. So they were a little bit behind, and they were getting complaints about that. But so we did do a new one. I think it was last year. I think it was when it went out.
Okay, good.
But yeah, you're not going to be dealing with big or anything that's going to have multiple disciplines. It's going to be small,
Okay.
basic projects.
And then the performance evaluation document, is that going to be used for every project?
I don't like that. We're not on that yet, but I do not recommend doing any type of written performance evaluations of either the contractor or the architect. I think it's just.
Or any kind of closeout procedure or anything that?
Look, the way I look at it, it's going to be you're putting a lot more work on to do something that could come bite you on the back end. You're creating public documents that don't need to be created. You're trying to put down on paper something that it's really a subjective thought. If you're having a problem in a project, you're going to have a paper trail back and forth through email or otherwise, attorney letters. If you're having a problem, you're going to know about the performance problem, and it's just as easy to go back through the project documentation to pull that up, rather than create new evaluation criteria that you're going to have in a file, and if next year or 2 years from now when you redo this, some architect that may not get selected this time will pull the information and maybe see that, oh, wait, this guy got selected over me and he had a bad evaluation too. I think you run into an issue of maybe creating a standard, a legal standard that could validate a challenge. And I think if there's a problem with the project, you're going to know about it. The other problem I have with these evaluations is, particularly with a contractor, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
We have a low bid system. I mean, there's now a disqualification on responsibility. I don't know, I haven't done one yet. I don't know if anybody has done one yet that I'm aware of. So if they're the low bidder though, they're basically,
They're in.
they're in. Except y'all been doing CMAR, which is, I applaud y'all for it. I'm trying to get more boards to do it because it allows you to have input on your contractor. But for a contractor, I don't see any use. For an architect, a lot of what objective criteria do you have? Are they putting their drawings out on time according to their contract? Are they showing up to the project on time? Are they responding to questions on time? Well, that one even becomes tricky because there are many contractors out there who will submit what's called RFIs, requests for information, just constantly. And that's a lot of paperwork that's generated for zero reason whatsoever other than to create paperwork in a lot of cases, or to build a claim. So it's very hard to evaluate an architect without looking at the dynamic between architect, contractor, and owner. I mean, you could have a project that's really slow, and everybody in the public is going to be wondering why this field isn't being built on time, what's going on, and they're going to say, well, that architect did a bad job, that contractor did a bad job. Well, maybe it's neither, maybe it's one, maybe it's both. I don't know, but it's not an easy thing to evaluate. In all honesty, it just creates more work and potentially runs into a problem later. You may be running into a problem as far as creating a standard
So
for a challenge.
would you remove that, then even the rating system within the rubric of what
No,
you
I
say?
think if you want to, if you want, by weighting criteria on the rubric as far as the RFQ, it does prioritize what's important to a board. Now, technically you have no process that you need to undergo. So if you don't want to put it, that's fine, but at least with the scoring system, it can kind of show the board where somebody was strong at, where somebody was weak at, and weighted accordingly. So I don't necessarily disagree with weighting the points for the RFQ itself. Yes, there is going to be subjectivity, but I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Broussard?
I agree with the rubric you set forward, but I would like to see more emphasis on minority-owned business. Some time ago, I asked if we have a set-aside program for minority-owned business, and we're supposed to be looking into that. I would like to see that into place. And to judge a person's performance, from some of us from the naked eye don't really know what exactly happened or why it happened. And I don't want to put too much of a burden on Mr. Guidry and Mr. Bordelon in their profession, because they know more than we do as far as what they're looking at. And for us to be given the opportunity, and I think to micromanage would be, would be too much of a burden for us to undertake. But to judge a business if they have a home office or an office, with the small business, I think the home office is very important, because if you're a small business, minority-owned business, this is home to you. But we don't want to shy away from the fact that we might get a better product someplace else. I'm not saying that. I would prefer Lafayette and Lafayette Parish enjoy the fruits of the taxes so it comes back to the school system. But we don't want to shy away from the competitive edge that's offered to us someplace else. So with this rubric and with this 11-point bullet you have, if somewhere down the line, if we can put in there, either in writing or just in general, a certain percentage on the set-aside program to go to minority-owned business, so we can help them to perfect their skills so they can get up to the major projects that's being offered.
This board, as far, I don't believe has a MWB, minority, fair share, whatever. There's all kinds of names for the different types of policies. What I think without the policy, I don't know if we can put it in the rubric itself, and a policy.
Well, that's what I'm asking for, us to put the policy in so we can be in this room.
So that's going to have to be something separate.
Mr. Broussard, I think Hannah Mason and myself, we're working on something that we should have at our next board meeting to present to the board. So we're looking at something like that, and then we could just go from there.
And I'll be happy to share some boards with their policies that do have policies that we would like.
Absolutely, thank you.
But getting back though, without the policy, I do think by having this little group of smaller contractors, I think it will encourage, the small pool for the small projects, I do think it will encourage participation for minority businesses and give them an opportunity. I think that will help on that end. I don't know if it'll be the answer, but it may help to get them in their foot in the door.
Hannah Mason?
So I just had a question about the process in getting the policy. So we would have to have a policy enacted by the board first, and then in this rubric, we reference that policy?
Yeah, if you actually look at the East Baton Rouge policy, there is a section they call it fair share.
Right, I saw that one.
So that is how they went about doing it, and they put a percentage, let's see, what was their percentage weight? They did an 11% weight on it, as far as scoring. And what their policy is just to, it's not a quota system necessarily, but it's a goal, they have a 20% goal of minority or women business enterprises to reach that goal. They have, even with contractors, they show how they're going to hire subcontractors to try to get to that 20% goal. It's not a mandate, but it is a goal, and it does seem to work.
Mr. Harden, which page is that?
Now you're putting me on.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time just
I know it's in
pulling it
here.
up quickly. Is it?
Hold on,
Control F, you can put in the word.
Oh, thank you.
4.7, thank you, Billy. So, and they're not page numbered. So it's on 4%. It's about 4 or 5 pages in.
Yeah, we have to decide, and then we'll vote, yes.
I still like paper over computers.
Yes. Hannah, you want to just let us know when you find it, and we can come back?
Oh, yes, no, I found it.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were waiting on me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to just read it with my own eyes with the 20%. So in between this meeting next, we can explore
Okay.
what sort of policy.
That sounds good.
And I'll let Danielle know about that as well.
Okay. Mr. Angel?
Yes. I'd like to make a comment about a comment you made.
Yes, sir.
Relative to some of the people in, I think it was Baton Rouge, East Baton Rouge, whatever it is, Parish. Some of the smaller projects like we're talking about, you mentioned, I'm not going to quote verbatim, but you said sometimes they're even given on somebody's whim. You mentioned that, the decision.
Yeah,
to
the
choose the
decisions
architect.
are, yes.
And my conviction, you know, my belief, and I feel strongly about it, if we're going to pick an architect or an engineer or anyone on somebody's whim, I ask my fellow board members, let it be on the whim of the person who represents the district in which the work is being done. Not on somebody else's whim. Let it be our whim. I mean, we deal with the public every day. I know Irma and Kyle got pictures today. I sent them of a problem I'm having at Carencro High School. They see me every day. They see me at the post office. They see me, well, different places. Sometimes even in church, you know. But I see my constituents every day. And I plead with my fellow members to let me have, and by the same token, let you have input as to who does what in your district. Let me give you, let me, and I know I've said it before, but I've been dealing with architects and engineers since 1974. Any architect can send a paper to our, and I don't mean this in a negative sense, but I'm gonna call them, I'm gonna say bureaucrats, people like y'all that do it for a living. Any architect can qualify for anything. I remember not too many years ago, we built, was it Como, is it called a black box? Yep. A black box. And so we did RFQs, RFPs, whatever, for architects to build a black box. Well, we hardly had any architects in Lafayette that built such a thing. We haven't built, I don't think a black box was built, maybe in Lafayette High years ago, but people can get together with other people elsewhere and qualify for anything. I mean, they can hook up with an architect in Los Angeles or Washington. I mean, and then he said, now look, I have this little firm. Now, we've done this before. We've done 10 of them before. I mean, you can do that, and it can make all hundreds on the scorecard. But have you really done it before? And let's go see what you did before. I mean, I take the position that I wish that you would give us, the elected official, the representative of the people in our district, a lot of input in this selection process. Thank you.
Mr. Lachlan?
Also, I don't know how many of my fellow board members looked at some of the paperwork that we laid out at the last meeting. We still have our ratings list. Y'all remember seeing that we still have our ratings list, that if this is not prepared, we can use that rating list for another year to where we don't rush this. And that's what we used for the wings and so forth and so on. So it would still be within the time frame of an RFQ, whether it's a year, 2 year, 3 year. The one that we have now, so we can start doling out projects tomorrow off of that list. Because I know Dr. Aguilar was very adamant about getting projects done, getting projects moved, getting this done. This has been sitting on the back burner for a year. I think we get this right and we work on it, whether we vote on it tonight, next meeting, or whatever. But before we go through the new RFQ, we have a list of solid architects that are laid out right now. And these are the people that built our wings and so forth and so on. So we do have something available if we choose to use that for this next cycle, as we can move into this for the 22 project listing.
And just as an aside, there is no required process to select an architect or a designer. There's no legally mandated
Right.
process. So
Okay.
I just want to make sure y'all know that this is purely at the board's whim to make this decision
Correct.
to do this.
But this has just gotten information that if we've got to start working on projects, we have what I consider a solid list now, that we went through this process. Now, the new process, tweaking and so forth and so on, I think moving forward, but we have it, and I looked for my copy, and I can't find it. I don't know what I did with it, but as we go into this budget cycle that we're working on now with projects, or even past projects that haven't been assigned, we have a list, and we can work off of that list.
Dr. Aguilar?
Actually, Mr. Lodge, I agree with you that we do have a comprehensive list of architects at our disposal, and we have been kicking this thing around for over a year. I'd like to offer some guidance to the administration that we begin with Mr. Hardy's 11 points, and that we work closely with the rubric used by the local architect, because I like the rubric, the guidance that it provides, and we match those two documents together to the extent possible and submit that back to the board for consideration, that for a document that we might use. And if necessary, I would make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Dr. Aguilar, would you like to repeat that motion for Ms.
Yes,
Amanda?
that we utilize the 11 points discussed by Mr. Hardy in his letter to the board, along with the selection rubric for projects of minor complexity provided by a local architect, and we build a similar rubric-driven document that can be used to evaluate the efficacy of choosing a particular firm for small projects.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Aguilar and a second by Mr. Lachele. So when Ms. Amanda is done, we'll go ahead and vote on it.
And once again, Dr. Aguilar, I think my comment fits better to probably 2.3.
I have a question. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask a question.
Okay, yes.
For Mr. Hardy, since the rubric includes this MWBE, do we need to worry that we don't have a policy in place yet? Or is this just with an intent?
Well, my understanding is y'all may be presenting a policy soon.
Right.
So if that's, and this is going to be.
It's just an outline.
We're going to work on this over the next few
Okay.
weeks and stuff.
I just
so
want to make sure we
If you
weren't.
have a policy in place, it'll be better. I prefer to have a policy in place, if you're going to include it, yes. But I don't think it would be illegal per se,
Right,
but I do think it would be recommended.
But we could get one in place quickly.
If y'all vote on it.
Okay. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Look, there's another one coming. Here's the list of architects.
Yeah, Tommy made the motion, oh, no, it's Dr. Aguilar. Dr. Aguilar. Yes, she's changing. So. Okay, the motion on the floor is that the board creates a hybrid RFQ document utilizing the 11 points noted in Mr. Hardy's memo, along with the minor complexity rubric. We have a motion by Dr. Aguilar and a second by Mr. Lachele. So the only change we made is that the motion reads now that the board directs staff to create a hybrid RFQ document utilizing the 11 points noted in Mr. Hardy's memo, along with the minor complexity rubric. Motion by Dr. Aguilar, second by Mr. Lachele. public comments? Any board comments? I'll call for the vote. Motion
7 for,
approved.
none against.
Next item is item 2.2, discussion and/or action concerning the evaluation component for contractors and professional services, small capital projects. Mr. Guidry, would you like to update us on that?
Yes, this particular agenda item is in response to board members' interest in at least reviewing evaluation processes that could be used to evaluate both the contractor and the professional firms. We have 2 documents that we have provided as a starting point for discussion. And unless there's any questions or comments, I was going to turn it over to, or ask Mr. Hardy to share his views, his experiences with an evaluation process of this nature.
Madam Chairman.
Dr. Aguilar?
I would appreciate if we defer action on this item based on Mr. Hardy's earlier comments about this being really not something we want to quickly move into evaluating via public documents. So I would urge that we take no action on this agenda item. And I'll offer that as a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to defer this item by Dr. Aguilar and a second by Mr. Angel. Any public comment? Any board comment? Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Again? Twice.
Tommy, vote. That's okay.
I was looking at Jeremy, the guy who's stuck out here.
7 for, none against.
Okay, motion carries. Item 2.3, discussion and/or action concerning selection process for architects and engineers and assignment of projects. And the recommended action is that the board identifies and approves the selection process to utilize in selecting architectural and engineering firms and assigning small capital projects to them. Okay. Mr. Guidry, would you like to update us on that?
The first agenda item, we addressed the RFQ, which is part of the selection process. This particular agenda item, I guess, completes, you take from the RFQ. Once that's done, you have the evaluation points, and then it becomes a matter of identifying the selection process where the professional firms, either architectural and engineering, are identified based on the guidelines. It might be, for example, the firms that 4 firms or 5 firms or 6 firms, whatever that number is that the board's interested in, that received the highest number of points, or the architects, or the mechanical engineering firms, or electrical engineering firms, that will be part of the pool. And then that's first step. Second step is identifying the guidelines to be followed and assigning the projects to those professional firms, be it in the area of architecture or engineering, so on and so forth. So this particular agenda item deals with that piece of the process. If there are any questions or comments by board members, I would again ask Mr. Hardy to share his opinion as a result of the research that he's done.
Board members? Mr. Lachlan?
I think this is the one of the majority of my comments earlier. I definitely want to see this process come to the board and have board input, and echo what Mr. Angel said of if it's a project or projects in your district, you need to have some say-so with merit. You have to have a good reason as to why you want to go this direction or that direction. I guess this is replacing the fishbowl. I have no problem going down the list, but matching the right architect with the right project. And of course, the higher you rate, the bigger the project that would go to your direction. And I don't know if we need a motion or to add to go ahead and stick with the list we now have for this upcoming budget cycle, and any projects that haven't been assigned yet or dealt with yet, of keeping the same list we have and then moving forward with the new criteria as we go into the budget cycle next year. But I definitely want our process, I want it transparent, and I want it done on the board floor. Anything and everything that's picked. And if I ask to be involved or I ask for a certain architect, I will have the information necessary to give to my fellow board members and the public as to why. It won't just be because. I will have a good reason as to why, and I'm going to agree with Mr. Angel 1,000%. We have to have the input, because like him, I see my constituents on a daily basis in some of the same places he sees his. So that's my only input in this. We need to be a little more active in it, and if you don't do good work, then we don't have to give you work in the future. There has to be some accountability. We're just not going to hand out projects in the future. If you have not done good work or you're not doing good work, I don't care if you rank number 2. We've got to correct that. And I'm not saying anybody has or hasn't, but that has to be a part of it. Thank you.
Ms. LeBeau?
Can I ask Mr. Latchley a question? Are you envisioning that for any amount of project, or are you envisioning like a certain threshold below this amount, you're okay with us not being consulted, but above a certain, is there, I'm just trying to determine whether you're envisioning the larger projects or whether you're envisioning the projects of small capital
No,
projects or projects that might.
I'm not talking about a roof at Judy's Middle.
Okay,
I'm talking about when it comes time to build Prairie,
okay.
Carrico Heights, a press box.
I just wanted clarification on that, because I
Yeah.
think that's an important part where, you
No,
know,
not-
we have
not-
trust at a certain level, and then we'd like our input to be valued above a certain level, and I just think we need to communicate that and have that clearly
Right.
defined so that everybody understands. Board members need to be involved when it gets to
The bigger ones.
a bigger level, or a committee, or if you have a selection committee for a bigger project, if we would, you know, it's in our district, we would like to be involved in something like that.
No,
I could see that going either way as an elected
Right.
official, not wanting to be involved,
No, not-
but people who have a preference, you know, should be considered, and I understand that.
No, that smaller threshold, or whatever we're gonna call it, that's when I agree with where we're gonna do policy here between Ms. Morrison and Ms. Mason, and
Ms. Dale.
based on what Mr. Broussard, those smaller projects need to really be opened up wide. And, you combine them, we have 9 roofs, I don't think you go get 9 architects, but you kind of group them together and give these people a shot. I'm talking when we get to, in the millions. Now, I mean, a roof can probably cost $1 million, I don't know what a roof costs. But no, field house, press box, when it's something specific in my district, I want to be a part of it. So I don't think it's so much dollar amount as far as what it is. Roof, or some of the other things we've been doing where these firewalls or these fire systems or water lines, no, not that. That I think ought to go to
Yeah.
the newer and smaller architects, no.
I just want to make sure, because I think, since this is kind of looking at small capital, I just wanted to see because I want us all to agree what level at which, basis we all want to be involved. And I think that discussion needs to be had. And so thank you for that. And I do like the selection board scorecard where it has specific questions about turf experience or thing. I know that it's really impossible for us to say, tell us your experience in everything, but I think we did a good job, or I like on the rubric that we do have, have you done roofing projects, have you done this? I like that, but I don't know how micro, or how much we need to make that more specific so that we ensure that we have the best information, especially if we're going to use it multiple years, that we know exactly all the information that needs to be on there, so we can figure out exactly when we're selecting a project, like a track or something like that, or drainage or whatever, that we make sure that we're asking them to cover all of the disciplines and the application of the disciplines as much as we can. I think right now we had 4, I think we had roofing and 3 others, electrical, plumbing. I don't know what specificity we need to have on there, but.
I guarantee you a track is not going to be put onto a minor complexity project of any sort. That is way too visible and way too.
Right.
I think we're talking about some.
We're talking about drainage, electrical, plumbing, roofing.
Again, a track has a lot of different components. So what we're talking about is really basic type of work, maybe some pavement, driveway repairs, or roofing and stuff like that, maybe some, minor HVAC work. We're not talking about anything highly visible like a track. They're not going to be doing this through this. That's going to be considered, I would think, a major project, unless it may be a little repair or something. Now, I would suggest because my experience is most board members don't want to be involved on a project-by-project basis. I would urge the members of the board, if there is a project that is of particular interest to an individual board member that may fall under this, that it be expressed to your staff so they know that and they can go before the board. It's just something that, that may become an issue if it later down the road. I mean, I don't know how you would handle that.
I think what confused me is if you look at the Ascension You know, it had construction contracts, 0 to $1 million, well over 20 million. So I thought this, what we were discussing, included bigger projects. But the one thing I'd like to see is, doesn't have to be board member involvement, but if you built, I'm gonna pick on Mr. Angel, if you built Karen Crow Middle, and you did this at Karen Crow Middle, and then Karen Crow Middle needed an addition or this or that, I would think it would be smart on our part to use the same person, because they have all the experience of being on that property. So let's say you're paving something or you're building something, that should be your first choice. And I think we did do a project at Karen Crow Middle where the person who built the school,
His brother,
okay,
the person who built it died.
right. So that I would like to see is, instead of going a whole, and this person has no history on that property. You know, you just built Southside. Okay? Whoever worked and built Southside, well, we know who it is. We have projects being built there now. That same person is doing, of course you assign that to that person. And if we stick to that moving into the future, whether you built a wing at Broadmoor, the person who built the wing at Broadmoor, any other work around that facility should maybe go to that person, because they already have some knowledge of where everything is and have been on that campus. That's something we could not definitely, have as criteria to look there first. And that doesn't take board member involvement. To me, that's just common sense. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right.
Yep. Mr. Guidry? Mr. Guidry?
So that we want to make sure that we present what's being asked of us. So the reference to the listing that we already have. So we have a listing that we went through, I'll say complex projects of complexity or large projects. We have that listing that was used for wing additions and things of that nature. We also have a listing from the last small capital projects that have been presented to the board about a year ago. So we just need to know which listing, if the board does take action to allow us to proceed this year with the small capital projects only based on the listing, the existing listing, we just need to know which listing. The one for the large capital projects that would be used for the small capital projects process, or the ones for the small capital projects that was discussed back in February for the small capital projects. So just need clarification there. We're good with either.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Lachlan?
I'd like to make well, you might have to help me word it, but I'd like to make a motion that we use the large project one moving forward.
Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lachlan and a second by Mr. Angel that we use the large project rubric.
List,
Oh,
Listing.
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 summary and evaluation review, correct?
The listing of
List.
approved ranked architects and
Help me with
approved
this.
ranks, small project
Keep going.
providers,
I don't know.
something like that? Is
Where's
that
this-
what we're trying to say, that we want to use all approved ranked lists from last year's
No, the
RFQ?
list you have in front of you.
Yeah, but this is just architects. Don't we want to use the small capital projects approved list? That's what he's saying. We have two
Right here.
lists, right?
The small one or the big one? I'm making the motion that we use the big one.
That's the motion, and it's second.
That's the motion in the second.
Oh, I thought you were doing both at once.
So I said
No.
that right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this list is gonna be used for the small capital projects. We're gonna use this list right here and get started. That's what my motion is, that was seconded by Mr. Angel.
That's the motion.
You're asking about the second list, right?
Well, it's asking
We need to know which one.
which one.
I'm sorry, I got confused, I'm sorry.
No, this is just a
Mr.
summary.
Guidry?
Yeah, but I don't think that needs to be in the motion.
I would ask Mr. Lache to consider just referencing the specific RFQ number, which is the one you're looking at. And that way,
57-18.
thank you.
Thank you for your help, Mr. Guidry.
I have a question.
Ms. Mason?
Yeah.
Why are some of these highlighted?
They were awarded projects. Those were the wing additions.
Okay, thank you.
Well, no, it should have been
Ms.
more than
Marson, I have a question.
Roger Aguilar?
Mr. Guidry, do you have a list of engineers that have been ranked? If so, they would need to be included in this motion for us to move forward. These are just architects.
HVAC for the gym. Not for a large capital project.
Well, but what about small projects? Are there engineers that have been through the evaluation process and we have a ranking of?
We would have those for, that would, last small capital projects process.
So, Mr. Lache, I think we would need to include the engineers in this process. If we're going to act quickly with the backlog of projects.
Do we have the RFQ number for that handy to add to the motion?
I'll see if I can locate it real quick. Let's see.
But yeah, this is the list that we're going to use for the small projects coming up.
Yes, and I understand that. I also have a question, Ms. Lachele. To my knowledge, based on 4 years as superintendent, some of these architectural firms that are listed, they go all the way down to number 18, we have never used in the Lafayette Parish school system. They have never received any projects.
Right.
So a possibility might be to identify what portion of this list of 18 you would like available for awarding of projects.
Do you know where it stops with those we haven't used?
I believe it stops around 10.
And I think one is merged. I mean, I recognize the majority of the
So,
names.
so Mr. Lachele, maybe it's top 12?
Top 12, there you go. Ms. Blanco, can you put that in RFQ 5718, the top 12?
Mr. Elroy Broussard?
To understand the motion, said to get started.
Right here.
So it's the top 12 to get started on the projects pending. That is not to eliminate somebody else who's gonna want to come in and do work for this is just to get started, correct? Is that,
Yeah, I'm looking for,
that is the intent of the
I
motion.
don't
This
see
does
a
not,
reference to an
this
RFQ.
does not limit someone else to coming in.
Mr. Broussard, my understanding is until we approve a process, that this would at least get us to the assignment phase for
Or
the
tomorrow.
backlog of projects, including the current proposed projects.
Okay, I just need a clarification on the motion, that this does not limit us, or this does not limit someone else for coming in to bid on the project, but this is just to get started on a project that we have pending, to get started as early as tomorrow if necessary. All right.
So if I may, Dr. Aguilar, for clarification, Mr. Bourlon says we've not ever used number 11, 13, 14, 16, or 17.
So I think since we have used some of those, that we include only the architectural firms that we have had business with in the past.
So that would be 1 through 10, and including 12, 15, and 18, Mr. Bourlon, is that correct? Okay.
All right. I didn't know I'd need that much help. I don't mind help. You don't know, you ask.
Got a question, Mr. Aguilar?
And I think, Mr. Guidry, I think we maintain this list for the large projects, or whatever you want to call it. Use this for the small projects to really get started, whatever that threshold is. And maintain this list for at least another year for the large projects with the exact same numbers, architects that we pick.
And what about the engineers?
That was an advertisement, and the responses that came in were considered, so a reference might be those identified during the February 12th, 2020 meeting. The engineers, the listing of engineers identified during the February 12th, 2020 meeting.
So if we could get some more help and add that to your motion?
Correct. Give me the help.
Dr. Aguilar, you want to?
So including the engineers that were identified pursuant to an advertisement in the February 2020
February
agenda?
12th, 2020 board meeting.
2020. No,
It's last year.
a year ago.
We're 21.
Good enough?
We don't want to do 20 again.
No, you don't want to do 20 again. No, no. But
We never had to vote on that
It's deferred, it was deferred, yeah, number 2.2 was deferred.
That's what I wanted to make sure we weren't having to do that.
Mr. Guidry, while they're working on my motion, generally speaking, like a small capital project, that's like, does that have like a certain dollar amount?
Typically, with the exception of roofing projects, re-roofing projects, typically they're in the 450,000 or less range.
Now, do we plan on grouping these?
Grouping.
Like if you do a roof, I mean, does, you have 9 roofs, does it go to 9 different architects, or do you group them together?
But that would be part of the decision we'd have to make, yeah.
I think in the instances when you can, when they're, close to the same scope, I mean, you get one architect. If you're doing 4 or 5 roofs, you get one architect to do all of them, to where, kind of like, what do we do with the mechanical engineers? The air conditioners in the cafeterias?
We lumped it into 2 packages.
Correct. Some of it you can lump, which makes it,
Well, there's advantages and disadvantages to doing that. If you lump 5 roofing projects and give it to one architect, they'll be working on 1 or 2 at a time and putting those out for bid. But if you want to try to put them all together in one big package, then it's going to take a while to get all the packages designed, put out for bid, and then comes the challenge of finding a contractor who can handle 5 projects at one time.
could we maybe just use the criteria when it's to our advantage to group?
We could.
When it's to our advantage, group it, And I mean, I think it comes out to the same thing. I mean, I think if you've got, whatever we have, 12, 13 architects on a list, we've got 25, 30, 40 projects. I don't know how many small projects we typically come up with. I mean, I think they still end up with the same amount of projects, but when it's to our advantage, I'd like to see it grouped.
Mr. Lotchley, we're still working on your motion, trying to make it even better. So the question, if you look at the proposed language, did you want this list to be used for small capital projects as well as large?
Correct.
Yes, so.
Correct.
Ms. Amanda's going to add that. And did you want the staff to make recommendations regarding the selection of architects and engineers for projects?
With board member input, if
With-
necessary.
okay.
For the large, not so much the small, but at least for the large.
Okay.
So,
And have it come to the board floor, not just given.
so we need to make sure, Ms. Amanda, you add the additional language, please.
Ms. President.
Ms. Mason?
Can I ask Mr. Hardy a question about just some details in these other
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hardy, in the Bossier capital improvements, RFQ PDF, 11.7 says the Bossier Parish School Board has the final selection authority. Does that mean that they vote on this, or what do they mean by final selection authority?
Ultimately, the board will select the architect, the recommendation will be made by the evaluation committees, and then those recommendations of those architects, engineers, design professionals go before the board. The board has the ultimate decision to approve it. Just like this board has makes the ultimate decision to approve the selection, unless that decision has been delegated. So for purposes of the RFQ, the selection would be a recommendation from the evaluation committee, which will consist of staff, it will consist of a member from the AIA usually, or some other architect generally that's either retired or not looking to perform work for the board. And it's usually staff at that point. It won't be a board member, because the board member would be voting on it.
Okay.
But the board member could have input at the interviews.
Right, because the part before it, 11.6, says the selection committee shall submit to the Bossier Parish School Board the list of its recommended firms in order of preference recommendation for award based on its analysis of the materials submitted. And then the next part says the school board has the final selection
Right.
authority. So it sounds like it's actually like the board instead of just this selection committee.
What the committee will do, they will vet all the proposals, they will do oral interviews if they feel it's necessary. Ultimately, they will make a recommendation of, let's say, 5 architectural firms, a couple civil engineers, a couple mechanical engineers, and they would present that to the board, and it would be up to the board to approve entering into contracts with those individual firms, or approve some of them, not the others. It would be the board's final say to have the authority to enter into contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Now, now select the assignment of projects is where we still haven't
Is where
figured
we
out,
are.
but that's what y'all, still
That's what we're
drafting the
figuring
motion,
out.
at least
Okay.
for the
I
current
just-
backlog.
Right, it's like semantics now, so.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm surprised it's not here. Mr. Broussard?
Be occupied. Just for the record, I do not believe in putting these projects together, especially a roof. If we sending a roof project outside, it's because it's raining in the building. And to have one person in charge of 4 or 5, I think it would delay the process. Some jobs, I think, in my estimation, does not deserve to be put together all in one bucket for one person to do it, because it'll take, you start in January, be the end of the year before it's completed. And some projects has to be taken care of immediately. So the selection process for the architect or the contract to do whatever first, second, third, fourth, or fifth would be delaying. So I just, for the record, I don't agree with putting all the projects in one basket for one person to decide.
No, smart man. Mr. Latchley?
Mr. Bordelon, before I forget, like, when we're doing stuff, when we're advertising for firms, whatever it is, I mean, how do we do that? Like, we're looking to, like, we're gonna use the list we have now, but that won't be forever. So we're gonna go through this process, and then we're gonna advertise, or what do we do? Do we send a letter to all architectural firms within the Acadiana area? How do we go about advertising? Is it on our website? How do we advertise that we're looking to get engineers or architects?
Typically, in the past, we put an advertisement in the newspaper.
Okay,
In the recent past, we have reached out to the local organizations, like the AIA organization, and asked, like, for this RFQ, some information on RFQ, asking for input.
okay,
We reached out to the local AIA chapter and asked them to spread it out to their membership, and the local ACEC, the engineering chapter, asked them to spread some information out to their local chapter, and also put it on our website.
okay. So, in your opinion, are we doing everything we can to make sure these individuals that say they never have an opportunity, or that they don't know when we're doing stuff, do you think we're doing everything we can do without personally sending it to each one of these individuals' address?
Yes, I mean, we are relying on the local chapters to spread the word to their folks, and we assume that they're doing that, and I think they would have an interest in doing that.
What would be the possibility of us getting their listing and sending it directly to these people, to where we don't have a year or two from now, and I mean, anybody can say, I didn't know. You know, I could have easily said, I didn't know about this meeting tonight, let him check my email. I mean, anybody can come up with that excuse. I just want to make sure we do everything within our power to kind of cover that base moving forward. And if we think we're doing that, I wouldn't have thought just like a newspaper or, our website. I would think word is going to get out through the community that we're going to be moving forward with a new list and stuff probably within the next year. That, the people take it upon themselves to put their name in the hat. And I know we can't get everything 100% right, but I just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to know that this is coming, and do that to the best of our ability, so that, we don't have well, I didn't know. And we're going to have that anyway, I know we will, but I want to reach everyone we can.
We can make that attempt. However, every time something goes out, we'll have to reach out to the local organization and ask them for an updated list, because people will drop off of these organizations, and some people don't even belong to some of these organizations.
I think that's the point I was trying to make.
So,
I think I went the long way around.
I'm not
I think
sure how
everybody belonged to some sort of organization.
I'm not sure how to reach out to those people who don't belong to the organization, but if we send it just to the organization, we at least know that they're going to send it out to their membership, and they keep a current membership on everyone. So I think that's the best way for us to do it, is send it to the organization and let them pass it out to their members, because they have the most current membership listing.
Where is this ad placed in the newspaper? Can we find a different place to put it? I mean, is it a little ad, a small ad? I mean, do these people know? I would guess. Do they know to look at the newspaper for these type of things, or just?
Typically it's back in the classifieds,
Okay.
in the fine print, because, I hate to say this, but we have an advertising, the purchasing department has an advertising budget.
Correct.
And those little ads way in the back are pretty darn expensive.
Okay.
And we put a lot of ads for a lot of things during the course of the year.
Okay. Thank you for that. Did we vote yet?
Mr. Latchley, they're ready. It'll show up as two separate agenda items, one for small projects and one for large complex projects.
Okay. Sorry, I had to
It's not up yet.
step out for a second. Drinking too much water.
It's not up. Okay, now we have it.
Very proud of you for doing that.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is that the board directs staff to use the architects listed as numbers 1-1 through 10, 12, 15, and 18 in the RQF number 57-18, and the engineers listed in the February 12, 2020 board meeting for the immediate assignment of outstanding small capital projects. We have a motion by Mr. Lachele and a second by Mr. Angel. Do we have any comments from the public? Okay, you want to step up to the mic?
I'm just Jim Potion. Just wanted to make an observation on the list that y'all are talking about utilizing for the engineers. I think y'all have done a great job on the architectural part, and I think, Kyle, what you and Billy have done in the last 12 months or so has really gotten more participation from a lot of the architects and engineers in the community and the organizations. But the particular list that you're looking at using is a list that was only advertised in the newspaper, and it's done once a year for the projects during the year, and nothing was ever awarded from those. But I know our firm didn't see the ad in the paper, and numerous credible firms, engineering firms in the community. I think on that list, there's only 2 civil engineering firms. There's numerous civil engineering firms in town. So the only thing I'd like to maybe suggest for consideration is, I think you've done a real good effort on getting to the architectural community. I don't think the engineering community has responded as much, although they have now, but over half of those people aren't on the list that y'all are getting ready to adopt to give out work. Our firm, for one, isn't on the list. We never saw the advertisement either year, and we're not on that list. So it might be something you just want to consider to maybe delay the engineering part, proceed with the architectural part, and ask Kyle and Billy maybe to follow up with the engineering organizations to see if in fact there's anybody that would want to be on that list.
And then I think the engineering part of it is just for this small project cycle so that we can move forward. I think moving forward, we need to do that. This was just to get these projects going now. I wouldn't want to delay it any further, but yeah, moving forward, we have to do our best to get the word out.
Ms. Morrison?
Okay. Ms. LeBeau?
As a follow-up to Kyle, Mr. Bordelon.
Yeah, Ms. LeBeau, we were still on public comment, so let's see.
I'm sorry.
Do you have any additional public comments? Okay.
Hey, good evening. My name's Jerron Young. Currently, I'm with a former employer. We've done some projects with you guys. Just want to follow up on Mr. Broussard's comment about potentially getting on the list. We're in the process of establishing a new firm here in town, and we would like to potentially consider be added to that list. Understood if that process has been closed, we could do next year, but just wanted to kind of add those comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, Ms. LeBeau?
Thank you, President. How many projects are outstanding? Because we've tried to narrow the scope of the motion to just the immediate outstanding small capital projects. How many engineering projects are there? Because obviously now we know there's 2 firms, at least in one category. I mean, is that going to, do we have a huge backlog of engineering projects that, and a small number of firms to select from, or do we feel like we're confident moving forward?
Dr. Aguilar, while we're waiting?
While Mr. Bordelon's searching, Mr. Poche, does your engineering
Firm fall under the same name?
Poche Pruitt Associates? If so, you would be included and eligible based on the anticipated language of the agenda items.
that's fine if that's interpretation, but one of my considerations is, I think some of the significant engineering firms, especially civil, it's basically civil, mechanical, and electrical, and y'all have given out most of the mechanical, which is something we would have done, and we're not trying to be ungrateful, because y'all have been more than good to our firm, but I'd hate to see a good electrical engineering firm, a good civil engineering firm didn't apply for the job and wasn't on the list because they didn't see an advertisement. Again, I think the process they're using now is much more aggressive, and make sure that those firms that belong to these organizations turn in applications. I'm not necessarily wasn't making the statement for myself, because I think the part that we would have gone after really wouldn't have been significant. But if our name makes our firm eligible for either one, that's fine. I think my interest is really out for some of the others. I think we're content with y'all have been doing with us.
Mr. Broussard?
As I understand the motion, this is the conversation was to get started, but the motion said for the immediate projects to get started. To the gentleman who spoke earlier, you're not eliminated from doing the projects this year or the immediate future. At any time, the way I understand it, any time you can request whatever necessary to get any job that's on the books. It's not, I don't think it's really limited to this group, but it's still open to anybody who wants to bid on these jobs. That's the way I understand the motion to read. This is to get started on what we've got on the books as of tomorrow, but it doesn't mean you're eliminated for jobs for next week.
That's right.
And Mr. Bordelon, if you're on the, I don't want to put you on, too much pressure on you to answer right now, but maybe at our next board meeting, which is, at the early stage of next month, if we see there's a problem with engineers, maybe we can look at what we need to fix to get that immediate assignment of projects that are backlogged.
I don't have an exact number for you. This is a list that I've been working with, where my idea is to take some of the some of the projects at one school and group them together, since it's all at one school. And I don't have an exact number, but I'm thinking this is in the area of about 40 to 50 projects. A lot of them would fall into the architectural category. There's a couple of civil projects, not too many. There's virtually no mechanical projects, because any mechanical projects, we've taken those off the table because all the mechanical replacements are now under the air conditioner maintenance contract. And then there are a few electrical projects on here, fire alarm, intercom projects, or some electrical upgrade projects. So, just off the cuff, that's the best I can give you information right now.
That you perceive that it will be fine if we move forward as the motion reads?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional comments? Okay, we'll call for the vote. My screen went blank. Is your screen?
Well,
So just a question while we're waiting for anyone in the audience, and it could be a nod of the head. You have the three different types of engineers: civil, engineering, and mechanical. And they're all specific. You don't have like a mechanical engineering firm that does electrical and civil. Okay. So, all right. Okay. Thank you.
7 for, none against.
Motion carries. Before I adjourn the meeting, oh, okay. Okay. All right. So, all right. So it's the same agenda item? Okay. Okay. All right, okay. Discussion and or action concerning selection process for architects and engineering and assignments of projects, of small projects.
I'd like to make a motion, I have it right here, that the board directs staff to use the architects listed as numbers 1 through 10, 12, 15, and 18 in RFQ number 57-18, and the engineers listed in the February 12th, 2020 board meeting for the immediate assessment of outstanding large complex projects after opportunity for discussion by the board.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lachlan, second by Dr. Aguilar. The motion states that the board directs staff to use the architects listed as numbers 1-10, 12, 15, and 18 in the RFQ number 57-18, and the engineers listed in the February 12, 2020 board meeting for the immediate assignment of outstanding large complex projects after opportunity for discussion by board. Motion by Mr. Lachlan and a second by Dr. Aguilar. Any comments from the public?
Charles Beasley. I would just like to caution the board against using the list that we're talking about for giving out of larger projects. They should go through an RFQ process and a qualifications-based selection.
Any additional public comment? Any board comments? Ms. LeBeau?
Just as a clarification, we are going to have board discussion about that, but are the size of these large complexity projects that we're talking about, are those typically go through a separate RFP process?
Yes.
In the past. So we are breaking from what we've traditionally done with those large projects by just approving this motion and not having a separate RFP process, correct?
For the next year, in the interim while the process is being worked on, yes.
And we're talking about the immediate backlog of large projects. Do we know how many projects that envisions?
Well, the large capital projects consist mainly of the 3 schools.
So what we're approving right now would be for those Lafayette High, Karen Crowe Middle, and Prairie?
Yes, they would be.
Karen Crowe, I apologize, Karen Crowe Heights.
That's correct.
So there aren't any other anticipated projects that fall in the large project category in your list, Mr. Bordelon?
Not really.
I think they've been direct assigned already.
I think those have been direct assigned already.
Can I make a substitute motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make a motion to defer decision on large, I'm sorry.
The Woodvale cafeteria project would fall into the larger and complex projects also, but we haven't assigned that yet. but we would normally do an RFQ on that.
For clarification, RFQ or RFP?
RFQ. We cannot pick architects based on price or take proposals, so we have to do it on qualifications.
But for the 3 school projects that we talked about, that would be an RFP process?
RFQ, to be
It's
exact.
all the RFQ
Yes, ma'am.
process?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel comfortable sitting there today that you have enough information to assign the large projects that you've just discussed without having to do additional vetting?
I would just answer that question saying that we have typically assigned the larger projects through RFQ processes in the past. That's been our typical method of the way we've done operations.
And so for clarification, the way you've ranked these architects, you would have asked different questions when ranking them for an RFQ of, let's say, for proposal of building an entire school?
Potentially, yes.
Mr. Lachlan?
Was there an RFQ done when we did this list?
Yes.
To bu-
RFQ 5718.
Right, was a $9 or $10 million wing considered a large project?
Yes.
So, there you have it. It was done. Just hasn't been redone. It is the list you look at when you assign these large projects. We could probably go through it again. It'll probably end up the exact same way.
Ms. LeBeau?
Were these architects, they were selected based on specific criteria and then assigned and ranked? They were not put in a fishbowl and then one was drawn out first, correct?
Correct.
So my final, again, I just want to ask this one more question. Would you have asked more information and found, and possibly these rankings would have changed if you'd have had an RFQ process specifically to build Lafayette High, Karen Crowe Heights, and Prairie?
If we were to develop an RFQ for the Lafayette High project, because of the complexities that's going to be involved in that project, I believe, yes, there would be some different questions that we would ask in that RFQ to try to find out the experience and expertise of whoever's applying for that work, to find out what they've done in the past and try to find out how they've done those kind of projects.
Thank you, Mr. Boywell. I would like to propose a substitute motion,
Yes, ma'am.
but I need the verbiage of the current motion. I would like to do the current motion, but exclude the construction of the 3
Replacement
schools. Replacement of the 3 schools specifically.
And you don't need the
So
list.
that would allow us to move forward with Woodvale. It would allow us to move forward with some of the projects that are outstanding, that are large capital projects, but not these 3 schools that I feel like would be RFQ'd and vetted in a more substantial process.
Do we have a second on this motion?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Dr. Aguilar. Any public comment? Any board comment? Ms. Mason?
I'm not sure what I need to do here, but we have sort of a special situation with Woodvale, you know, it caught on fire, and it has to be, I've discussed it with the attorney, and there might be a different process that we need to do with Woodvale being rebuilt to replace and repair the cafeteria. Since it's already slated to be expanded, and it needs to be repaired right away, it might be an emergency situation. I don't really know, I would like to pull Woodvale out of that list as well.
And that's from my understanding with my discussion with Kyle, that would be the last large project that would be considered. So you would be comfortable just deferring the entire motion?
If we can pull Woodvale out of that as well. We're trying to,
But if we pull Woodvale, Lafayette High, Karen Crowe Heights, and Prairie, then there's no other capital project, large capital project to assign. So we could just, our motion would be to defer selection of architects and engineers for the large complex projects until an additional RFQ process would take place.
okay. I'm kind of unclear what to do, but I am working on another plan for Woodville is what. You think I can?
So, Ms. Mason, you're wanting to make sure that we're able to move more quickly with Woodville.
Yes.
So is it my understanding that if we pull it out of this, that makes, it postpones us
It will
being able
postpone
to?
it.
Several months of delay.
Okay, no.
See, I'm leaving Woodvale in for immediate assignment, but I'm taking out the 3 schools because I feel like the vetting process for the RFQ
Okay.
for the building of
Alright.
the 3 schools would be more substantial than possibly what we use for other large capital projects.
then I'm on
I want to
board
make sure
with that.
when we go to build 3 schools, that we are sitting here confident that we have RFQ'd specifically for those 3 projects, because they're going to be 3 massive undertakings. We want to make sure they're done 100% right, and we're confident that we picked the right person to move that forward. So that's why I would prefer to exclude those 3 schools.
So with Ms.
Consideration.
Mason's motion, then, Ms. LeBeau's motion, Woodville is still in the group that we could move more
So
quickly on.
immediately,
Okay,
that one could be
correct.
assigned, but the other 3 would be taken out.
Okay, then I agree with that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Orgel?
Well, I'd like to speak in opposition to the substitute motion. There's nothing wrong with submitting an RFQ for the 16 or 15, whatever architects that we have on the list that were already submitted an RFQ. It just sounds to me like somebody's left off, and it's a roundabout way of getting somebody else on there. Thank you.
Mr. Latalo?
Mr. Angel, just because you have an approved list doesn't mean you still can't do an RFQ. Supposedly, all we have is Woodville. What if in 3 months we have 2 more major projects? What if something else happens? We have a list. I am prepared to approve this list just like we did the small for the large. Remember, if we want to put out another one, we can. But if another big project comes up within the next year, then it could be delayed. We have our list. And whether you use the list for the new high schools or not, the new high school and the 2 elementary schools matters not. We have to have a list in place. So I'm going to vote against the substitute motion to put this list in place, and we can still move forward.
Anyone else? Ms. LeBeau?
I just want to reiterate that we're missing 2 board members, and I just would hate to vote to move forward with 3 of the 3 biggest projects we'll probably be facing in the next, 20 years, without the input from the person who is district, one of these schools will be built in, at least his vote, and Dr. Chasson. So I just, while I think these architects are fine, and I think that they've been vetted, I just don't think they've been vetted in a way we might vet them for the complete construction and design of 3 schools. So I have no problem with this list, and I'm excited to work with each and every one of these people, but I just feel like I don't want to approve moving forward with 3 major schools without those 2 individuals present to vote.
Ms. LeBeau, I just wanted to kind of remind you that the board members will be involved in these processes. So although we don't have board members here, if those projects are in their district, they will be involved in these processes. So I think we could feel comfortable with that moving forward, since that's what we decided upon. Okay? So if there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion on the table. On the substitute motion, I'm sorry.
2 for, 5 against.
Okay, with that said, we'll go back to the original motion on the floor. Okay, just to read the motion that was originally on the floor, the motion states that the board directs staff to use the architects listed as numbers 1-10, 12, 15, and 18 in the RFQ number 57-18, and the engineers listed in the February 12, 2020 board meeting for the immediate assignment of outstanding large complex projects after opportunity for discussion by the board. Motion by Mr. Lachele, second by Dr. Aguilard. Again, any comment from the public? Any comment from the board? By seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Six for, 1 against.
Motion carries. And before we adjourn the meeting, I'd like to thank Ms. Troxclair, Mr. Guidry, Mr. Hardy, and Mr. Bordelon for all the information that you provided us today. Thank you for the input, and thank you, board members. So without any further business, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.